You're listening to Real Folk with me, Jo Burke. A new edition of Real Folk. This is sort of series 2, although I'm probably not going to separate them as series. So I think it's number 15, if I'm not wrong. And joining me today, I'm very excited, is a fellow comedian and performer and writer. And you may have heard of him, but it's unlikely that you'll have heard of him by this name, which is, of course, his real name, which is Benjamin Bankole Bello. I think I've said that correctly, hopefully. And you will recognise him possibly as his alter ego, President Obonjo. So welcome aboard, Ben.
Hey, how are you, Jo? Long time no see.
I know. Do you know what? I was thinking when the first time I met you, I think it was Edinburgh 2015, and it was outside Cowgate. We were both at Cowgate.
Yes, I remember you very, very well.
Do you?
I had no idea. Yes, of course, because I was screaming my head out trying to get people to come to the show. And I remember you making some comments at the time, not knowing that I had to reserve my energy for the show itself. I think the show started outside flying.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing. It's so hard, isn't it? I mean, you write the show, you're performing the show, and then literally most of the day you're out flying, and then literally just before you start the show, you're out trying to drum up as many people as possible. How was it for you that year?
Oh, it was fantastic. Even though I have to confess, looking back, I had no idea what I was doing. When I said I had no idea what I was doing, I knew I wanted to perform. I knew I wanted to get better in Edinburgh, but I had no idea how the show was going to, how people were going to respond to the show. I had no idea how Edinburgh Fringe worked anyway. I was just excited that I was in this cupboard. I call it a cupboard.
They were glorified cupboards, fire hazards.
And before, no reviewers. I had no idea what reviewers were. I just literally didn't have an idea how comedy worked, how the promotion of comedy worked in Edinburgh. But lo and behold, someone heard about me who happened to be a reviewer who came over the second day, and he was just blown over and wrote an article about what he had seen. And I just saw people come into the show, and it was a free show. I had no idea what was happening. I just kept doing my show. And then before I knew what was happening, I got a review from Fringe Guru, 5-star review.
Amazing.
And I think that's where the act actually made its name known. It was in Edinburgh rather than in the comedy circuit. It was in Edinburgh that things actually started to happen, because I've been gigging since 2011. But not making any impact whatsoever. Then I went to Edinburgh, and I just started receiving all this sort of gigs, and I just, what the hell is going on? And I just thought, yes, life at the Apollo in 6 months' time.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's that you think that's it, your dream, it's all going to happen now. And then it's the peaks and troughs of being a performer and a creative. It's like when it's good, you just think, right, okay, this is it now. And then usually, not always, it's suddenly the carpet's pulled out from under you again.
But it's not like it's pulled out. I think if I had to do Edinburgh again, I did it last year. I've done it 4 times. I think you just need to be strategic in your approach. You need to do your market research, understand what are you going there for. Certainly in 2015, I went there because I wanted to be better as a comic. I wasn't expecting any reviewers. And then in 2017, I knew I had built an audience. I always go back to Edinburgh because I knew that my fans were there and they were expecting me. And then 2019 was bigger because that was the year that I made hit headlines. When,
so we need to go into that one. So just before we go into that, because is that is the massive story, really, I suppose. But just going back slightly from 2015 when we first met at the same venue, how did you even get into comedy and stand up? Are you from a performance background, or did you just wake up on morning?
I'm just one of these, I would say, and it will come across as if one is being big-headed. I'm just one of these natural performers. I see myself as a natural comedian. Long before anyone said I was funny, at the age of 5, my father used to get me to come with him whenever he was driving around. And I remember him saying to me, "Oh, you are so funny." So that was my first reviewer before Steve Bennett, before Bruce Desayou, before Brian Logan. My reviewer was my dad. But I was born in Liverpool, then went back to Nigeria at the age of 5. And I knew I wanted to be funny, but I knew that I had the gift to be funny, but I wasn't really encouraged in Nigeria because in Nigeria, you're not allowed to be a comedian. A comedian is that you're just going to be poor, basically. So I didn't really have the courage to do anything about comedy while I was in Nigeria from 1970, let me remember, 71 up until 1985 when I arrived in the UK. But I did know that every time I was around people will invite me to parties because they found me funny. That was basically it. And then in 1985 up until I didn't do anything about comedy until when Obama became president in 2008. And I suspect that my wife was attracted to Obama as soon as he became president. It was just, it was so annoying because, I'm a black man. I think I'm as handsome as Obama, but she always kept talking about Obama.
Yeah.
And I do remember that my nickname is Obonjo, and Obonjo sounds like Obama. So I created a Facebook account and I started posting stuff about how I wanted to run for president in Nigeria. And I had a flurry. I just had, long before people started using social media to promote their comedy, I had been doing that even before I went on stage. So you could almost call me in 2010, I was more of a social media comedian. I had no idea that I was going to go on stage. I had no idea that I could actually perform comedy. I just knew that I was funny online until someone invited me to a wedding reception. And it happened to be a wedding reception where I'm sure it's not the same with the English, but with African weddings, they have someone like a compare, similar to someone who compares at a comedy club.
Right,
they have
like a master of ceremonies.
Like a master of ceremony, yeah, that kind of thing. And so the master of ceremony didn't show, but my friend then said, "Oh, Obonjo, you are so funny. I think you can anchor this. Just take it. Help us." With 300 people, I just went on stage and I did what I needed to do, warming up the crowd, introducing the guests. But I didn't know that there was someone who was an expert in stand-up comedy. And he came to me, an English guy, and he said to me, "I have never been to a Nigeria wedding where someone actually controls the audience, but not only controls, entertains them, but you were the soul of the party. Have you ever tried stand-up comedy?" And I just thought, what's stand-up comedy?
That's so strange because from what you said, it sounds like you were ahead of the curve there, Ben, because if you were a sort of online sensation and doing sort of social media stuff way before most people were, and then so then you sort of almost went what would be considered backwards now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I just went backwards. So he took me to the comedy store. And when I went to the comedy store, I was performing as a civilian president. So I was performing as President Obonjo, but not in uniform. I did the gong show and I lasted 48 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then I went back there again because I was determined, because that was the only way I could get my way into gigs across the UK. Yeah. So I went back there several times and I cracked it. I went there twice as a civilian president. And then in 2000 and I think it was 2011, Obama was facing some problems with the Republicans. And I just thought to myself, what would Obama do if he was a real African president? He would become a dictator. So I was at an army shop, second-hand army shop, and I bought a uniform. So I took it to the comedy store and I killed the comedy store. 5 minutes, lasted 5 minutes. I didn't win the gong, but I did very, very well.
Amazing. That must have been huge.
It was huge. It was just posting the photograph on Facebook and people saying, "Oh, you found your mojo. So I think when I look at my career, I'm what you call an accidental comic. I didn't plan anything. I just wanted to, as soon as I got the bug for comedy, then I said, yeah, I can take this seriously. But at the very beginning, I was just an accidental comic who just wanted to have fun on the stage and just try it and see it. But things just materialized.
So the next thing was obviously you've got your uniform and you've established over many years this President Obonjo character. And then it was, as we sort of mentioned earlier on, it was 2019, wasn't it, when something strange happened in the neighborhood?
Yes.
The comedy neighborhood.
Oh, wow. Yeah, 2019. So I switched on Twitter and I saw an article from Steve Bennett. It's not like Steve contacted me to say, "Oh, Obonjo, what do you think about this?" I saw an article to say BBC Studios and E4 are launching a new African dictator sitcom.
I mean, it's every performer's writers, character stand-up's nightmare, isn't it? To work so hard for so many years on a character and read that.
Yeah, I read it and I just thought, what the hell? And it didn't sink in until, because I'm fairly laid back about these things. When I say I'm fairly laid back, I take my time to digest information. So I just posted and I said, this is an interesting development. And before I knew it, I woke up the next morning and the whole comedy community was on it.
Yeah.
And they actually, for a few hours, the comedy community were more angry about it than I was.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose I possibly, and it's an army term, perhaps you were in shell shock as well. It's and I suppose the rest of us, when we saw it, because I know how I felt when I saw it, I was horrified, absolutely horrified, because as I've said, I think it plays to all of our fears that, we work so hard, honing our craft and our characters and our work. And it is very, very easy for one of the big companies to just come in and swipe it all up.
Yeah. Well, I almost lost everything. It was 10 years of hard work. And, with the rejections, with the self-belief that I knew I had created something unique within the comedy industry. It may well not be what the comedy industry wants, but in my view, you have to have your own voice.
Yep.
You have to determine your own comedy journey. Not everybody's going to be picked up by the gatekeepers. And that's the way I've seen my career in comedy. So it was almost like, wow, I've worked for 10 years. They're going to take this off me. And that's it. I'm done.
Oh.
I'm done. So I had to fight back. But I fought back in a way that wasn't confrontational. I was lucky, yes, I had lots of people support me along the way. But I said to myself, even there was someone who approached me who was joking and said, what if they give you $500,000? Will you just sell the character to the BBC?
Interesting. What was your response to that?
No way. I had walked blood, sweat, tears, a loving wife who saw my pain, my children. At times when I'm not around, I was gigging all over, trying to perfect what I had created on stage. For £500,000, I'm sorry, no. $500,000 and not do anything about President Obonjo. Nah, President Obonjo is part of me.
That's why it works.
That would be killing me.
And to be honest, I saw the comedian that was supposed to be doing this new version of you, and it just left me completely sort of dumbfounded as to why they would have thought it even worked, because your character is so believably funny and sits better with someone your age, with your experience, and with everything that we see on a daily basis from various dictatorships. The way you've played it just is the reason it works, and so to have a younger guy come in and be sort of smiley about it, and it just was really I found it really jarring. But I don't know if that's because I'd seen you, and whenever I think of a comedy dictator, I think of Ben, that's who I think of. So I think when you saw this interloper, you were like, and who are you? What's this about? This doesn't feel right. It just didn't feel right,
Yeah, even it's got to a state that when anybody sees any black man in uniform, even real army soldiers, they send me a picture to say, I was thinking of you today. That's how the brand has really, really worked.
But you're massive on TikTok, aren't you, as well? Huge.
Yes, 500,000 followers on TikTok.
Wow.
And people genuinely believe that they're talking to a real president. It's unbelievable.
So what sort of do they interact with you on that level?
So they interact with me. So I do presidential speeches. I talk about, so the most recent thing, actually, there's been several that hit the news. The one that really hit the news was, the very first one that hit the news was, you remember a couple of, probably about 40 days ago when Donald Trump was arrested?
Yes.
So I did a video in my bedroom in Hertfordshire with uniforms that I bought from Stephen H. And I did a very 1-minute video to Biden. And I said, look, Biden is my friend. No, Donald Trump is my friend. I hear you've arrested him. I'm giving you 24 hours notice. If you do not release Donald Trump, I will invade America.
What happened?
Oh, you will not believe what happened, Joe. So I recorded that video, posted it at 8:00 on Friday. By Saturday, my phone was ringing. When I say ringing, what I didn't realize is that I had gone viral.
Oh,
not only had I gone viral on TikTok, I'd gone viral on Twitter. a MAGA supporter, a Donald Trump supporter with 8.5 million followers on Twitter, tweeted, African president supports Donald Trump.
Do you know, that's one of those things that is like, wow, on so many levels. It's an onion wow, isn't it? It's like, wow, that happened.
Yeah, I got free PR, free publicity, because everybody was debating whether I was a comedian or a president. The Democrats did their research. They found that I was a comedian, and they were making fun of the Republicans. So every time they tweeted about it, they'll make the Democrats will make fun of the Republicans. 3 days later, Reuters gets in touch with me. Reuters press agency get in touch with me through my website that they need to fact check me to check whether I'm a comedian or a president because I'm causing problems in America.
Sorry, that is hilarious. That is hilarious. So you've caused problems in America.
So someone said you have pranked the Republican Party.
I couldn't love you more.
On a serious note, what was really interesting for me was that people cannot tell the difference between
scary.
It's real and what is fiction.
Yeah.
And for me to put on that uniform and for people to believe that I'm a real president, and these are the people that we are trusting to make choices about who should run their country.
Yeah, well, we've put, the 99% have managed to put the 1% of idiots in charge, haven't we? I don't know why.
Yeah. And that was one of that was the biggest story this year. And then following it, there was a time I was doing a live TikTok. Someone reported me on TikTok to say, how could you allow an African warlord to be on TikTok? So I was banned for a week.
Oh, my goodness. It makes me happy, but it also makes me very sad about the state of affairs that we're in as a country and a globe at the moment. It's like,
But it just shows that the educational system has failed.
Yeah.
I would have thought that if someone presents something to you, you will do your research. These people genuinely believe that I am a real president. And when I'm on Saturday from 9 to 10 in character, they're asking, why is Sunak not on TikTok? Why is Biden not on TikTok? Why are you so different from all these world leaders? Tell me how £500,000 against what I have been able to achieve over the last, it's been painful. It's been a painful journey.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And recently I did a work in progress show, because I don't have an agent. I don't have PR. I did a work in progress show in Leicester Comedy Festival called African Zaleski. And Brian Logan from The Guardian came to review the show. I don't know if you know Brian Logan, but he's a comedy critic.
Wow.
And that's a big thing. The fact that he actually came.
Yeah.
And he wrote an article in the Guardian, and the pullable quotes are a compelling presence on stage, and what the fuck did I just see?
Well, that's what more comedians couldn't want for more, could they? That's just wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. And I was just thinking, I've got no idea why you wouldn't be snapped up by an agent and why you haven't been already. I've got no idea. And also, quite frankly, having this conversation does make you realize that $500,000 is an insult, actually, to be offered for the amount of work you've done and to steal your life's work and your career, basically. It is ridiculous. But I was just wondering at the same time if, agents and PR people are a bit like the 1% in that they're worried about what to do with you, that they don't quite know how they would handle it,
So someone said to me, because I remember attending a comedy industry showcase. And someone said to me, it's not like we don't know you. It's just that we don't know what we're going to do with you.
Ah, so they've said that, yeah.
Yeah. And also, when I look at the guy who was selected to play my character, the character called Korean Banjoko, he has a higher profile in terms that he was a BAFTA nominee. I think you need to be in that circle. I think because I have formed I don't know. I just think that because I have been doing this for so long, and they're probably looking for someone who they can mold, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I also think what they like to do is to have, even though it's people that are usually well known on the circuit that they pick up, they quite often like to suggest that they've discovered you. And you've already got millions of viewers on TikTok and this, that, and the other. It's a bit difficult for them to qualify what exactly they've done.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's not that I've never been approached. There have been agents who've approached me, But I've said, okay, fine. What are you going to bring to the table? If you can't get me on TV, then don't bother, because it's not like I'm not getting gigs. I'm busy with gigs. I have a comedy special on ITVX called Stolen, which was
I watched it. I've watched it.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's very clever, and I love well, I won't give away what you do actually, but it's a sort of deconstruction, isn't it, of character stand-up.
Exactly, and that's what happened in 2015. And that's why I think it got such a big story in the news, because the view is that when you're in character, you stay in character, you don't come out of character. But I think psychologically, there was this, and that is what Brian Logan said in his article, that there was some confusion. And I think for me, I've often not necessarily struggled, that there's a part of me that wants to do stand-up comedy. Yeah. So that I'm fighting with a character on stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're both fighting for that voice. And I can stay in character when I want to, but I just think it's fascinating. And that's what happened in 2015. It was 45 minutes of President Obonjo and then 15 minutes of myself saying how much the character is sleeping with my wife, driving my car on the M6, taking all my money, stealing my identity. Who am I? I don't even know who I am anymore.
I think it's really interesting. And actually the show that I did last year at Bath Festival and Brighton, and I'm trying to take it up to Edinburgh this year, but I still haven't got a venue yet, but is not dissimilar in the fact that mine's a deconstruction of celebrity culture, but it is that dichotomy of, that the you that's the writer and creator usually isn't as gregarious and confident as the character that you put on stage. So it gets easier for you to do it if you're a character. And then when you suddenly have to do straight stand-up, which we've both done both, it is hard when you first do that, because you feel so vulnerable and you feel so exposed. It's really exposing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is exposing. But I remember someone saying to me, because the accusation at the time was that until that 2019 thing broke. Actually, what was really interesting, that 2019 story, not that I worry about what people think about me, but it was very, very interesting how some people said a few things on the internet about how long I've been going, and they didn't think I was very good as a character comedian, or some people said, oh, he got better. It's just really interesting. However, I think that what I found, because I do straight stand-up as well now, but not that I'm trying to kill the character, because even my fans won't let me kill the character.
Well, he'd have to be assassinated, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he'll have to be assassinated. He'll have to be dead. But it's how certain promoters will not give you the opportunity to actually perform as a stand-up comedian, because all they've seen is so you're almost pigeonholing yourself to that character. It's really interesting. Now, for example, when I arrive at gigs and the uniform is in the bag, a promoter will think that, oh my God, what have you done? Where's President Obonjo? And I'm thinking, yeah, he's in the bag. I'm going to put him on. It's not like
don't panic.
Don't panic.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because why should they think that? Because, I do character stand-up and I love it. And I love straight stand-up as well, obviously for very different reasons. They're very different sort of principles involved. But it should be clear to promoters and people that if you can write an amazing stand-up character and have the place, in floods, tears of laughter, that you can do it as a stand-up as well. Obviously you might feel that you need to work at that a bit more if you've first done stand-up as a character, but you should be able to get some stage time and have people trust you a bit, surely.
Yeah. And there've been instances where they've been able to do that, and it's been a pleasure to be able to do it. But I think, because I remember someone saying to me that, and it was, I don't want to mention the comic's name, but she's a female comic who really just liked what I did. She's on the top of her game. And she basically said to me, I don't know why people are saying you don't do straight stand-up, because yes, you're in uniform, but you're cracking jokes.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's crazy. Yeah, go on. It is
crazy. I was just going to ask you as well, the shows that you've done, have you done an hour-long show as straight, or is it just President that's done the hour-longs?
So there is plan to do an hour show in Hastings in June as Benjamin.
Aha.
called 50 Shades of Crazy States. That's the plan. And it's to talk about how I pranked America and how it's not just about pranking America, just how social media, it's very difficult for people to understand what's real and what's not real.
Yeah.
And the educational system has failed across the world. That's the plan, to do an hour. And it will be my first hour as
yourself.
As myself, even though what was really interesting, and if you've got time, I could send you that link as well. It's probably worth referencing it. What was really interesting was, because when I did that show at Leicester Comedy Festival on the 9th of February and Brian Logan came, it's really interesting. This is the first time that someone has actually referenced my name rather than the president, if that makes sense, and says Bello is a compelling presence on stage as President Obonjo. So it was really interesting. So that's a quote that I could use as myself as well, if I want to.
Yes. Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing, actually. Yeah, I wonder why. So they normally they refer to it as President Obonjo in all the other reviews.
So he talks about President Obonjo, but he then talks about the confusion between President Obonjo and Bello. And then he said, even though the title says President Obonjo said X, Y, Z, but when you read the article, he talks about Bello as well and says Bello and there's a photo of me there's a photo of the character, but he says Bello as President Obonjo is a compelling presence on stage. And I'm still trying to figure out why he did that. But I think for most people, you might, because you do character comedy, I've often been criticized at times that I should not deconstruct the character and that I should just stay in character. But I think it just offers a different dimension to it.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting view, and especially in the current climate with like you said, the fact that people don't seem to understand the difference. So it's an interesting slant on things. I suppose it depends on the audience and what they're expecting. I think at festivals and things, people are a lot more open to experimental stuff and to being provoked into thinking about something, but not necessarily on your every night stand-up shows.
That's why, in having done it for a number of years, I think I've grown to realize that the character is more of a festival comic and feels freedom and the opportunity to create things differently as a festival comic rather than doing comedy for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's And what was really interesting is that you said you watched the ITVX comedy special Stolen. I was surprised they took that because it's so, and the way the audience went with it, because they didn't know, none of them knew me. They never heard. I was
going to ask you about this. So who approached who? So they approached you about that, and then how did you get bums on seats for that? Because if it wasn't,
it was a 2-hour hander with Jambi. So Jambi and myself, we worked together to get the audience. So I think if I remember correctly, she did her first hour, and then there was a break, and then I did my hour.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what happened, and then I got a deal with Next Stop, and then Next Stop said that ITVX wanted it, and that was it. That was the end of it. And
did you enjoy the whole process?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I mean, at the time, it was going so well that I thought, because I just thought it reminded me of the 2015 show as well, if it was different. But as you know, the show was about how BBC Studios and E4 tried to steal the character of me. But then it just reminded me that, my God, this is like deja vu. I should call it Stolen and maybe just show them a little glimpse of what it's like to have a character steal your entire identity as well. So that's why I called it Stolen, and I merged almost the two together at the very, very end. But it was a different show from the one in 2015. I really enjoyed it, and I loved the way the audience went for it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I only watched it last night, actually. And if anyone's thinking of watching it, it's when I tried to find it on ITVX, I typed in Stolen first because that's what it was called. And it didn't come up. And you had to type in President Obonjo to get it. So just a little tip for anyone listening that wants to see
it. Thank
you. Don't type in Stolen. It doesn't come up. Or go to Ben's website, which is that's President Obonjo, isn't it?
Yeah, that's www.presidentobonjo.com.
Yeah, and then you can, I think, click on the link from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So talking about people mixing up art and life, how do your family deal with your character creations and your comedy life?
So what's really interesting is it was one of many reasons why I wrote the show President Obonjo Stole My Identity, because it's really interesting because I'm going to be running the character workshop soon on next Saturday, and there are a series of questions I need to address. And someone was talking about social media and what impact it has on doing character comedy, and do you need to have a social media presence in character? I can only speak from my experience, and my experience is that what I grew to realize that I started performing on stage is that there were audiences who not only wanted to engage with the character on stage, but wanted to hear from the character after the show had ended. Yeah. So that meant that it's crazy, and it's only when the pandemic came in when was it?
2020.
When 2020, that I realized that, wow, at times I don't switch off from this character when I'm not on stage. And I remember in 2015, my son, that is why I wrote the show. My son said to me, Dad, I don't even know who's my dad anymore. I don't know whether it's President Obonjo or whether it's Benjamin.
How old is your son?
Oh, no, he's 18 now, but then he was, how old was he then? He was
15,
20.
15.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when it dawned on me that, wow, yeah, my wife never complained about it, but there are times she would just say, oh, yeah, Mr. President, wear that uniform when you're making love to me.
And what about your parents and your other relatives? Do they?
So because I'm one of these comics who took up comedy in middle age, and so I know that the people I went to school with in Nigeria think there's something wrong somewhere upstairs.
I know. Why is it people think that? Instead of going, oh my God, they're so creative, they go, clearly they're insane.
Yes. Eccentric, insane. My mom, she calls me Obonjo. She calls me President Obonjo. But I remember there were times when she would say to me, you've been doing this comedy in uniform for a long time now. Have you ever thought of maybe you should just slow down a little bit? And then she would jokingly say, I'm praying for you. I'm going to get a pastor. I'm going to pray for you.
It's so funny, isn't it? How people, I suppose, but in a way, they've got no concept of what it is, really. I mean, that's how I feel with my mum. She always, whenever I say I'm doing a show, her response is, do you have to?
I think actually what I would say to you is that we having done, because written off stuff about the character comedy workshop, it's almost like you're in your own world, your own fictional world. That's the way I see it, and you can't let anybody in unless they understand what's in that world.
Yeah,
and that is quite an interesting. But I've got my family and friends are supportive of it. Let's not talk about work, which is a different thing entirely.
And that's an interesting thing, because the other thing is people that are not in the comedy industry or the arts might be listening to this and think, well, that's obviously a case of living the dream, and he's doing all this, it's amazing, he's probably making his living out of that, but very often we are not. So
what's really interesting is I think after the pandemic, before the pandemic, I think people frowned upon the fact that you can't call yourself a full-time comedian unless you were earning a living from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic came, and obviously it affected the comedy industry. And I think people understand that you've got to, in order for you to survive, you've got to have a job. It's as simple as that, because not everybody's going to be on TV, not everybody's going to get a sitcom. It's not going to happen. Work-wise, people know. I remember performing at what we call Up the Creek Comedy Club.
Yes, that's near me.
Yeah, and I went there on a Sunday. It was a Sunday night because they have a comedy special they have a show on Sunday. And I went on stage, and a member of staff saw me in uniform. And I just literally did not say anything until the next day. I took a day off, and then by Tuesday, my photo was had been passed around to say, "Guess what?"
So the secret is out.
The secret is out. But they understand, because I think for me, when I said I'm an accidental comic, one of the things that I know has helped me in terms of, because I do a lot of presentations, it's just the idea of going into a room where you've got strangers and making people laugh.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole, that's what I love whenever I go to see stand-ups or any theatre, really. It's that thing where you walk into this empty space and either one person or several people come on and take you on a journey for an hour or 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that's changed in that space are those people, you know. Yeah. And they've done that. They can do that. It's like magic, you know.
Yeah, it's like magic. So I always jump at any opportunity when it comes to public speaking, and that is a transferable skill. But also that's the emotional intelligence and being able to read the room. There are certain things that we can pick up straight away when we get into a room. Like, for example, when I was doing the African Zelensky show in Edinburgh, the show was attracting Ukrainians and Russians. The very first night I did it, it attracted a Ukrainian. And I could tell straight away that he was from Eastern Europe, but I couldn't tell which part, whether it was Russia or Ukraine, but I knew it was one of the two. And I could just smell it straight away. I could just smell that not necessarily the danger, just the fact that he was there, on that this was going to be an interesting show. So when I interacted with him and I said, "Oh, look, I want to know where you're from," he said, "If I tell you where I'm from, this is going to change your show." And he was right, but in a good way. So nice. When I said, "I need to know," and he told me he was from Ukraine.
That's amazing.
You can see the penny drop.
Yeah. And talking about Zelensky as well, it's like, so if you were, I mean, you can't write this stuff. I mean, he started, for anyone that doesn't know that, who wouldn't know, but I mean, he was an actor and then became president of Ukraine. So it stands to reason that at any given moment, you might have to step up here at some point. Are you ready for that?
I am. So, you know what's really interesting? When Zelensky got elected in 2019, the number of people who came to me and said, "My God, this reminds me of President Obonjo." So I have played on it to when I talk to the audience. So part of what I said in the African Zelensky show is that a lot of people don't know that Zelensky used to be a former comedian and that I used to gig with him, even though that's not true. But they believed it. That we used to gig together. And I remember in 2019, we just finished a gig before he became president. And I said to him, we were just talking and joking around and said, "Look, can you imagine if both of us become president of a country? Zelensky becomes president of a country. He's in 2023. Where am I? I'm at Leicester Comedy Festival playing to an audience of 25.
That's so great. I bet that goes down a storm.
Yeah. So it's and also just the fact that it's very, very, it's a very sensitive subject. Just talking about Zelensky, because if you go against him, because the point I was making on the show is that I'm neither a comedian, I'm non-binary, I'm neither a comedian or dictator, because I don't know who to support, because Putin is my friend, Zelensky is also my friend, because we used to gig together, and that the whole room just goes absolutely bonkers, because you're either for Russia or you're for Ukraine, and that was what was attracting Russians and Ukrainians to the show. It was really interesting.
And so you're doing the Edinburgh Festival this year, are you?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I've applied, but I'm reflecting on it because I think it's just so expensive.
Yeah, agreed.
It's just so expensive. And I got away with it last year because I applied really late. And what I decided I wanted to do, because I wanted to try African Zelensky, was just to do shows where people had dropped out. So it was very, very sporadic. I was there for 2 weeks. But luckily for me, there were people who caught COVID as well during that last year. So they pulled out of their shows. And I just went in there and I did my show. And I was just experimenting and just writing and just doing my stuff.
Good idea.
But I found out that it was just expensive. Even though I was there for 2 weeks, it was just expensive. And I just thought, there's got to be a better way, a
Well,
better
that's
way.
it. You do start to think, because I mean, I applied and I got offered one, and it was, when I worked it out, I was only doing it for 2 weeks myself as well. And I worked out the cost of it all. And I was just like, do you know what? I'm sure I would be better off spending this money on something else to do with the career of my comedy rather than just 2 weeks up in Edinburgh.
I'm just even thinking that perhaps maybe I can explore going to the States, even if it's 2 weeks in the States. I think that's better value. I know a promoter. I don't want to mention the promoter's name. They go regularly, and when I spoke to them this year, because I wanted to go with them, and they said, "Look, I'm not going this year, Ben. I'm not going, and I don't. This is the advice I will give. This is what he said to me. This is the advice I'll give you. If you are not a TV comic, or if you don't have a big social media presence, don't go to Edinburgh this year." So
Interesting.
It's really interesting, because I think it's not, how can you be spending £4,000?
I know. People don't believe you when you say to like civilians, as I'll call them, people that don't do Edinburgh, when you say that, just the accommodation was £2,000, they're like, what? And I'm like, yes. For a month to get anywhere decent, that's how much you pay.
So I would ask you, because for me, I would have done it 4 times now. What am I going to do in Edinburgh? Am I going there? That's the thing. Those are the things I've been thinking about. Am I going there to be discovered? Hell no. Ain't gonna happen. So what am I going there for? Am I going there to perfect a show? Can I perfect a show in other small fringes? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right as well. I think, I think actually quite often performers have better success outside of their own country often as well. So I think, putting, like you just said, putting that money towards going to America or Australia or somewhere new, to introduce yourself, you start on a more level playing field, and you're seen as something different immediately, because you're not from there, you're other already, aren't you? So
and I just use the UK to gain the experience. I think that's the way I'm looking at it. And if I'm going to go to Edinburgh, it has to be okay. Maybe I've got a week, and it's a week in a room where I can sell out, and do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm not going to be doing the hassle of flyering. I've done it. I've been there.
Yeah, we're all too old and long in the tooth for it now.
Well, I don't know about the age, but I think you just need to add value to your act, if that makes sense. Because it's not like I'm a new comic, so I need to respect the experience that I have gained over the years. And even last year, I did not fly. I didn't bother flying. I just thought, if anybody comes, they come. Even 2 or 3, because I'm only there to perfect the art, and not to be reviewed. Yeah.
And actually, you've just reminded me of something that I really loved, that you do a bit less now, because obviously we've been friends on Facebook all that time, but like that means, it doesn't mean that we've been in constant contact since 2015. But what I did do, which is, I'm assuming what most people do with Facebook, is that you do sort of keep tabs on people. And I used to love that after gigs, you used to do sort of like a little breakdown and your internal thoughts about things. And I used to really love that, because of the honesty and the thought-provokingness of them. It did make you think, that's interesting.
So it's really interesting, because I stopped doing that, because after the pandemic, during the pandemic, I realized that, look, I've got to find the right balance. And even when I was writing stuff, I was still thinking about comedy. And there's more to life than just comedy, if that makes sense.
Oh, God.
But also, I think at times, the way social media operates, it's almost like people who don't understand where you're coming from might see it as if you're bragging. And that wasn't what I was doing. It was a way to just... So what I did was, I decided that, okay, fine, if I was even actually going to do something like that anymore, I need to separate Benjamin from the character on social media. So I use my fan page a lot now, and I just assume that the 5,000 people who are on my Facebook page, some of them just want to be friends. It doesn't mean that they particularly enjoy my comedy. Those who really enjoy my comedy will be on my fan page. So there was one I wrote recently, and it was the Leicester Comedy Festival, and there was a woman who was in the audience, and she's pregnant. And I was very cautious of the fact that at times when people find me really funny, they just laugh so loud, and it's like, and I was feeling for her in the sense that, look, I don't want to make her have a baby in the
You don't want to be responsible for the birth of a child at your gig.
Yeah, exactly. But then I turned around because people know this joke. I have this joke about having 6 wives. And I said that the way she was smiling, because every time she found the joke funny, she will hold her stomach and then smile. And I wrote something that was funny that everybody, and I thought, yeah, people still enjoy this. And it was more like, oh, by the way, I don't know, the way she was smiling at me, I just thought, well, am I the father of the baby? Yeah, so the character can say those things, but I know there were more gig reports, but I just thought that at times, yeah, I appreciate the fact that you enjoyed it. Most people did, but there were a few people who I just thought, but when I meet them at gigs and how they will mention, oh, you like to self-promote a lot, I just thought, oh, you're misunderstanding what those posts are about, actually, because this is a very, it's a very lonely journey at times.
That's the thing. And that you've hit the nail on the head. And that's why when I was I've always preferred character comedy because of that as well, because I feel like I used to do a lot of the cabaret circuit as part of my character. And I find, not that I don't like the straight stand-up comedy circuit as well, but they're very different. The cabaret people, you just get, obviously by the nature of it, a much more varied mixture type of people, from, acrobats to musicians to stand-ups to, all sorts. And it is quite different when it's just a room of just stand-ups and you're the only character comedian, because sometimes in a room of just stand-ups, they can be very introverted and everyone can feel very awkward. And it's not necessarily, the green rooms are not necessarily what people would perceive them to be, which is like a group of 5-6 comedians waiting to go on, all jolly and having fun. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it really isn't. And it can feel awkward and there can be bitterness and egos and all sorts going on. So I've always found green rooms a bit like common rooms at school. I used to hate them because like the cool kids all were in a group and I sort of never really know where I fit in. So I tend to try and avoid it, really.
Yeah, I hear you, and I have almost not necessarily a bit. I genuinely think that there's a bit of there were two things. I remember two quotations that were that's why I stopped writing about it. I was writing stuff. I said, oh, I really enjoyed this gig. I smashed it, and blah 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 blah. And I'll tell people when I die on stage, but I hardly die on stage these days. Not happened for many years. However, someone wrote and said, it's not comedy, it's method acting. And I said, wow. So you think I'm not performing comedy, but it's method acting. I said, what do you mean by method? I went to go and Google what method acting was. And I just thought, why do you have to say that on the social media thing? And I just thought, there's a bit of, and I've heard people say, oh, he's just hiding behind the uniform. He doesn't tell any jokes. Or he's just shouting. And I just thought, it's quite possible that people are not entirely happy that, because I'm not sure whether you've not seen me perform, but you saw the stolen thing. But what's really interesting about the character is even before the character opens his mouth, people are already laughing.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's strange because one of my characters, Mary Magdalene, who came on in a full-blown wedding dress, and she was an alcoholic Irish spinster that used to come on with a suitcase and dress like a bride, pissed, basically. And she was the same. Obviously, people would guffaw the minute I came on because she was just horrendous. And then she goes on to be more horrendous than you could possibly imagine as well. But it's not cheating. That's not cheating.
but some people would see that as cheating. And and someone said to me, actually, even straight stand-up comedians are characters. They're an exaggeration.
Of course.
Of talking about. It's just that it's not visible. It's not, it's not as visible as someone wearing a uniform or someone wearing a wedding dress. But there is I fully understand that there is that division. I haven't created that division. It's just something I picked up.
No, it definitely exists, and it is tricky, and it's not always as supportive as it could be, shall we say? But I think the majority of people are supportive, and I think what's proved that is when you were under threat from one of the large companies, the fact that from small people that, you know, people won't have heard of, like myself, up to, I mean, you had huge people weighed in on your behalf.
And that's why I said it was an eye opener in terms of how people responded, because there were people. I still have those tweets. Not that I go reading them. I just at times when they crop up as memories.
Yeah,
I remember someone writing to say, when I first saw Obonjo, I had no idea what he was doing. I just thought, what the hell is this? This is a joke act. What I've grown to like what he does, even though I don't particularly like everything that he does, but what the industry is doing, the TV industry is doing is wrong. And there were so many comments like that. I just thought, oh, wow, I didn't know this is how people felt about my character. But it's interesting, you know. But 2019 had to happen. But yes, I don't disagree with you. I got the support that I needed, and I've been thinking about, maybe. I don't know how many character comedians are in the UK. I don't know whether there's a network, but definitely it's something I've been thinking about. There should be a network in terms of, you know, networking and just supporting one another as well.
Yeah.
It's
it's a good thing. I mean, like I said, I think the cabaret circuit is very, very supportive in that. And I've always kind of felt that that's where my characters always sort of belong, in more of a cabaret show as part of that than, because they stick out like a sore thumb often in a straight as part of a straight sort of lineup of comedians. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's very interesting, and I wonder if it confuses audiences sometimes as well.
It'd be interesting. So I can understand why on a lineup you can't have too many character comedians, so maybe you just have one or two. But I think at times, in my view, but there is something that they like the character.
We certainly do. Everybody does. Or the majority. Exactly. You don't get millions and millions of TikTok views and
exactly
the whole industry supporting you if it was disliked universally.
And I think genuinely promoters just need to take that risk. They just need to, because like the comedy store, for example, I was told I didn't know until I had done it several years that the Comedy Store doesn't like character comedy.
Period. No, lots of people don't. When I first started out, obviously doing characters, and I got into. I'd only done about 4 or 5 gigs before somebody said, "You should enter so you think that's funny," and so I did. I did the first round of it. And they wouldn't accept me as a character. They said, we like you, but we want you to be you, not the character, if you want to go to the next round. So I had to make a difficult decision, really, because I was very invested in her. And it's one of my, I know you shouldn't have regrets, but it is one of my regrets that I did it as me, because I didn't want to then. I did later on, and I do stand up as me now. But at the very beginning, I was very invested in character work, and I thought it was a shame that such a big competition didn't want characters. But I mean, it's their prerogative, it's up to them, it's not their thing, but I think it's a shame.
But what's really interesting is that nobody tells you that. I think that was the bit that was upsetting for me for not necessarily a number of years when I found out, but people had known that I've been going to the Comedy Store to try and get a 20, and nobody said to me until I spoke to
You're never going to get it.
Yeah.
On that note, we've been gabbling on for nearly an hour now. Can you believe it's flown by? But it's so interesting, and I think it's helpful for people to get a bit of an inside view of comedy and writers and writers that are, although you're not. The show's called Real Folk because I want to sort of champion people that people don't really know about. But it's a bit of a different one with you, because people do know about you, but not as you. So that's why I felt like you fitted, and I wanted to grab you before you disappeared. The truth of the matter is, Ben put on his Facebook, he's got so many millions of followers now, thousands, that he was going to do a cull, and I was like, oh my God, I've wanted to interview him for so long, and if he deletes me off Facebook, I'll have no way of getting in touch with him. And it's been so lovely talking to you and finding out a bit more about the Ben behind the Obonjo. So if people want to look at your stuff, what's your TikTok handle? I think that's
it's President Obonjo on TikTok. On Instagram is President Obonjo. On Twitter, you can find it as President Obonjo or at Real Obonjo. I think that's it. Social media, Facebook fan page, President Obonjo.
And as we said, if anyone wants to watch the ITV special that Next Up did, it's search for it on your screens under President, because it doesn't come up as stolen, which is the title of it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, and good luck with everything. And I hope you go over to America and storm it. I mean, you've got a built-in audience now, haven't you? Because because you've already stormed America, so to speak.
Yeah. Because when I look at the 500,000, how many of them are in America? At least about 35 or 40% of that is from America. It's absolutely crazy. So
they're waiting for you, Ben. Off you go.
Yeah, they're waiting for me, but I don't want to get shot.
That's a very good point. Ben, be careful. Don't go. Don't go.
Don't go. And I don't know how, I can walk on the streets in Britain with the uniform. I wonder how they will respond if they see me in uniform on the streets.
Yeah.
It's
another whole ball game, isn't it?
Yeah, but I will soon find out. I'm sure.
Yeah. Maybe just get some sort of bulletproof vest underneath it, just for safety. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Jo. Have a good Sunday. Have a good Sunday evening. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Real Folk with me, Jo Burke.